Maybe. Okay, we might be streaming.
Let me see. Yes, it appears that we are.
To stream or not to stream? That is indeed the question.
I'm just trying to figure out if they can hear us or if they can't.
I'm hoping the answer is yes.
Yes, I think they can, because I could hear it. Thank God.
Okay. Do we have anybody even listening or watching yet?
Yes, we do.
Oh, do we?
Yep.
I can't seem to find the stream, so.
It's Dexter.
Oh, hey Dex. There we go, I found it. Now it's coming out. There. That should be good. I killed some because I was echoing on myself.
I'm just gonna
Okay,
share
are we-
a little bit.
Are we ready to do
Rock
our
and roll.
thing? Okay.
Yep.
Welcome to episode 3 of Pause and Listen, a horror review podcast. Our guest tonight, Dexter, don't make me laugh during my intro. Our guest tonight is MrRemoraman, who's a very talented author and artist. We'll get links up to his Substack and his DeviantArt account right away.
I already put it in the description.
That's my girl. Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
So I guess you can find them there. How's it going tonight, Remora?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, man.
Glad to have you on. You're a very talented author. I've been meaning to do something from you for like the longest time, and I haven't gotten around to doing it yet. Reaper is also here, I see. Hey, Reap.
Hey, Reapers.
Hello, hello.
If you guys wouldn't mind giving the stream a like and a share and all that, we'd greatly appreciate it. So, tell us a little bit about you, Remora. What got you started as into writing and drawing?
Well, it's a long story. What got me into writing, it's something I've always done. My mother was a teacher. She had this huge collection of fantasy books from the 80s. And now, fantasy books from the 80s, they had these bizarre, crazy covers. And so as a kid, I remember she had these whole shelf full of Pierce Anthony Zant books. And as a kid, I was fascinated by the covers. They had monsters and critters and all sorts of things. And so she was like, well, how would you like me to read you one of these? Which I was flabbergasted by this. This was like an offer from heaven. And so she just started reading me these books, and she just kind of taught me over time how to read. By the time I was 4 or 5, I could kind of read on my own. I mean, I wasn't like reading Shakespeare, but I could read, basic stuff. I could read comics. I could read adult novels a little bit. I could kind of parse through it. And the first things I remember really reading were books by a guy who's largely forgotten now, and it's very unfortunate. His name was Pierce Anthony. I mean, not Pierce Anthony. Fuck me. I read Pierce Anthony, but the guy who really got me into horror was John Bellairs. John Bellairs is a largely forgotten author, but if you go into your local Barnes & Noble, over into the adolescent or kid section, you can still find a lot of John Bellairs. And he wrote horror novels about the occult and ghosts and spooky stuff. And that really got me into horror. I think I read just about every John Bellairs book ever written, including The Face and the Frost, which is one of my favorite novels of all time. And I just got really interested in ghost stories, the occult, all kinds of stuff. From John Bellairs, I got into Edgar Allan Poe. One of my favorite poems is The Raven. One of my favorite stories is The Telltale Heart. I read those when I was about, 12 or 13. And then, of course, you go from Poe to Lovecraft, and then from Lovecraft to like Stephen King and Thomas Ligotti and all that shit. But it was just kind of a natural progression. And eventually, I think I was about 14 or 15. I was like, you know what? I'm going to write my own damn story. And that's what I did.
Hell
And it was horrible. It was awful, but I tried.
What was the title
Well,
of that?
I'm glad that you tried it. I'm glad that you kept trying because you definitely got better at it.
Well, I don't know about that, but I've tried for a long time. I tried horror for a good long while. Then I tried fantasy, and then when I was about 17, I wrote this 700-page science fiction novel that will never see the light of day, and that's a good thing. And ever since then, I've just been kind of playing around with novels. I've never really been officially published novel-wise. But I've always kind of played around with it. Part of it was just because I got into college and I got stuck in academia for a good long while, or trying to get into academia and then falling out of academia and then trying to get back in. So I've just been kind of in and out with that for about a decade plus now. But I'm out, at least for now. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I really started writing short stories in my mid to late 20s, and that's kind of the kick I've been on recently. Short story, creepypasta type stuff.
Yeah, stuff that's absolutely perfect for my channel.
Yes, it is. I will happily write you something explicitly for your channel.
That would be amazing.
Oh yeah, no, because I write a lot of different styles, and like the third person style doesn't work for creepypastas. I've tried it, Lord knows, but the first person narrative style is the best. And
That's what I found as well. Yeah,
I'll write in that occasionally, but not often. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But I'll write something explicitly for you because I do love creepypastas. I was listening to those. I think my undergrad college is when I started listening to those. And then when I worked with my dad, I would drive around to the job sites with him, and I would listen to those. So I really like me some good creepypasta. The trouble is you got to find. I like original material. I'm not really into the Jeff the Killer, Smile Dog type stuff. I like the original stuff where people kind of come up with their own creepy ghostly tales, that sort of thing, really, or stuff based on folklore. I'm really into folklore. But
Very cool.
my favorites of all time are Weston Pass, which is to this day one of the creepiest stories I've ever heard. I love it to pieces. And the Huntsville camping trip. I really like the Huntsville camping trip. That one used to give me quite a shiver.
I don't know either of those. Sorry,
I
man.
those.
I'll
Yeah,
look into
I'd like
those.
to hear those.
I will say I also I do like Candle Cove a lot. Controversial opinion, that weird Channel Zero thing the Sci-Fi Channel did is dog shit. Actually listened to the original Candle Cove. That actually inspired my comic Through the Rye. That and Videodrome, which is also about creepy television type shit. But yes, I really love me some Candle Cove. And it's also one of those things that kind of faded away. It was really popular for a little while, and then it just kind of died out. But that's probably the only one. Well, actually, I shouldn't say it died out, because now that I think about it, Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared is kind of sort of like a real life Candle Cove. So I don't know.
I love that.
Yeah,
Yes,
I actually did a couple lines for Candle Cove for another narrator. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
an interesting story. Yeah, yeah, I like that creepypasta.
Very cool. I don't know it, so I'll take your word for it. Remora, I asked you earlier today if you would mind reading something for us. Did you choose something?
I'm thinking about it because I've got two. You can have one that is a little bit long, or one that is a little bit short. I got one that's 5,000 words, and I got one that is 1960 words.
Quite a lot longer.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I did my best. But Jimmy Horrors, by the way, give him a shout out. Nights In podcast is a phenomenal podcast, but Jimmy Horrors wanted two of my stories, so I had to whittle it down a little bit. I wanted to read something no one's really heard before, or that nobody's narrated before.
That's fair. I can appreciate that. I would say give us the shorter one, just because 19,000 words is a little bit long for this podcast.
5,000.
Yeah, the shorter one is probably the better choice.
That is 100% understandable. All right. So this one is called I Can Perfect Her. We met during the blustery winter of 2012 when the snow fell white and pure on a brown and corroded city. I was hunched in the corner of my favorite coffee shop reading a book that I had to write an article on. It was not, as I recall, a particularly engaging work, and I was constantly looking for distractions as I slogged through. Suddenly, a flurry of cold wind chased her through the front door in a shower of white flakes. As she blew in, I looked up from a page I had read 3 times and met her shy gaze. Her dark eyes encountered mine from behind her gold-rimmed glasses. She saw me staring at her, and her pockmarked cheeks burned red like coals. At first, she sat at a table a few feet away with a cup of coffee, pretending to engage herself. I knew she was faking it, since her dark eyes kept peeping at me over the top of her phone. I shot her a smile each time I saw her looking over, though I was puzzled at what she was so curious about. Finally, she got up, brushed herself off, and came over with slow wooden steps. Standing before me, hands clasped at her waist, she confessed an interest in the novel I was half-heartedly reading and requested a brief review. While I leveled my criticism against the writer, I don't even recall the book now, I traced the multifarious textures of her pockmarked cheeks with my eyes. My pupils outlined the numerous crevices, trenches, valleys, hills, and canyons that made her flesh a haven for my analytical gaze. Shapes and forms all blended into a tapestry of cratered skin, no less beautiful than the surface of the moon. She was my Selene, my Hecate, my bespectacled Diana. She agreed to lunch the next day, and the next, and the next. Whenever we were apart, I pondered her dark eyes shining from behind her square, gold-rimmed glasses. At night I would stare into the shadows above my bed and dream of those crevices, feeling their texture with my pupils like the braille of her soul. We were married in 2014 on a warm spring day when all the world seemed at peace with itself. She came down that aisle in a blizzard of silk, her crooked smile and textured cheeks like the sun and moon shining through a snowstorm. Put the ring on her finger, and we melded into a bulwark against a chaotic world of relentless and vicious storms. But from that day on, I emerged from my shell and approached life with a boldness I'd never felt before. Ordinarily standoffish, I found talking to people suddenly came more naturally to me, and we often traveled together and attended parties with friends. She was like a battery, an electrical flow I could draw current from. When we held hands during our walks in the park or on our long car rides, I could feel her aura pulsing into mine like a dynamo. We were an invincible team until the cancer diagnosis came unbidden, a fact of life we could not escape. It gnawed like a worm into her divine flesh, and I hid in the delusion of time and possibility. Both were equally and unequivocally false. The hospital chewed her body like bubblegum until 2017, when her toe tag became a stone marker blooming from her sodden sepulchre as the only tangible token of our love. My communication with the world outside my somber reality dwindled to nothing, and I found my health declining. Sleep became impossible, and though I was prescribed several medications by a therapist, the pills did not relieve my languishing depression. I performed nightly exorcisms with bottles and the salt from my tears, for salt warps off ghosts, so they say, a lacrimal cure for a spiritual problem. But these demons would not be banished back to the pit so easily. I pondered those dark eyes, that beautiful, imperfect smile, and those cheeks trenched and blasted like a war zone. All that she had was stolen from me, like Persephone whisked into the darkness. The bottles piled high in my house as I sank deeper into a slough of despondence. In 2019, though, The phantasm walked. The specter was a waitress in a bar that I had started to frequent, a new hire. Even through the tipsy haze of whiskey, she caught my eye and drew me in. The way she carried herself, how she smiled, the way her eyes brightened up her face, all were so familiar to me. It was like waking from a dream in a room whose every square inch gave one a thrill of deja vu. Though I had never seen her before, I felt I knew her, and that she likewise knew me. There she was, different and yet the same. Behind the flesh mask that was her face, it was she who I had loved and lost, carrying a tray of drinks, laying out bowls of peanuts and french fries, or dropping a quarter into the antiquated jukebox. Her, a sea of her, a miasma of her, a drifting perfume that filled the room and forced its way into my nostrils, tickling them with the sheer power and force of her. The more I watched, the more I realized. Her glasses caught the light when she glanced my way. Behind them, straight teeth, blue eyes, and perfectly smooth cheeks. I stumbled up to her and introduced myself in a groggy pantomime. I was initially afraid of the awkwardness that might follow, but this was obligation. I looked directly into her face. The memory was there in how she smiled at me, and how she blushed when I asked her to dinner. She had changed in her passage to the gulfs of time, as had I, but we were in soul the same bulwark from years ago. I could tell some remnant remained when we talked over our meal, and when I kissed her cheek at the door of her apartment. Yet a photograph of what she had been on my bedside confounded me. There was a contradiction in talking about the ring I still wore, and thought frequently of a Borges story, where an old man meets his youthful self on a park bench. I mentioned our former marriage as little as possible and tried to maintain a focus on the future. When we were together, we talked first of little things, and then of romance, and then of more long-term goals, but every night I would return home only to be befuddled by that photograph. In her new flesh, she was familiar and yet so different. She had come back clothed differently, but the same soul, even the same age she would have been if cancer had not ended things. As such, I always put the old photographs away when she came to visit. After only a year, I gave her a new ring. She said yes through teary eyes, and I wondered at her journey since we had done it all before. We immediately started planning the ceremony, which led to the first real conflict of our rekindled relationship. There was some hubbub about the services when she found out I was using the same caterers, the same planner, the same flowers as before. The stubborn woman wanted some newfangled foolishness, and I could not explain my reasons for contradicting her. Why did she resist? She must know in her heart that this was merely a commemoration of what we already had. For a week I heard nothing from her. I could neither visit nor answer her phone. I stared at the photograph of her old self and wondered if its truth might not be the greater reality. I spiraled back into the bottle, all the while speculating on the metaphysics of my presuppositions. What was it to die and pass through those great gates of eternity? After all, I could remember no past lives for myself. How could I expect it of her? To pass through into the all-in-one was to see what no mind could know, and perhaps somehow the revelation of the beyond broke the mind so that all memories died when one was reborn. Perhaps the truth of one's immortality was itself a secret the soul hid from itself, lest all human pleasure in existence be reduced to naught. So I went to see her in person one night and waved the white flag. Yes, she could have the caterers she wanted, the flowers, the priest from her family church. Yes, 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 to all. My humility wiped away all past transgressions, and we made peace. And as I held her and felt the beating of her heart against my own, I knew that somewhere she did indeed remember, was indeed there. I had to tolerate some indiscretions due to her faded memories, but her forgiveness was a clear message that I was destined to be her lover eternally. The wedding was different, yet exactly the same. I'd already been through it, so going through it again was a rehash of old material. The honeymoon went well, but it was during our time together that I glimpsed the problems that were starting to fester under our marriage bed. These misgivings started as an itch then advanced into a persistent rash that soon began to infect my skin with furious and unbearable blisters. For all my happiness, there was always something there below the surface, bursting forth at the most inopportune moments. She was different. Now that we were married and alone together, the differences began to overwhelm the tantalizing familiarity that had drawn me to her. It wasn't just her appearance, but in a million little ways that swarmed over me like a cloud of vicious bees. Her laugh, her smile, the way she voiced her opinions, all stung me with their alien quality. Much of the time, I felt like I was sleeping with a stranger. She was liked by my parents and my old friends, but none of them noticed that she was... I had all her old clothes, and when the itching reached its fever pitch, I threw out everything she brought with her when she moved into our old place. She was furious. I knew she would warm up to it all, that she would remember. The brown contacts were strange to her again, that childish resistance, but I knew she would give in if I questioned her affections enough. I insisted that they emphasized her dark hair, and finally I gave her the glasses for our first Christmas together as a married couple. I said they were new, but they were the old ones. The glasses were not prescription, of course, so they were largely ornamental. I said they made her look intellectual. She tried them on and looked at herself in the mirror with her dark eyes and those old clothes. That look she gave me. But I am content. I told her she looked beautiful, and she does. She is. She always was. Perhaps soon she will be content as well, and finally remember, and with remembrance, accept that. And it's our second anniversary today, 2 years since my Eurydice returned to me. I've already bought a soldering iron and tested it out on a block of wood in the garage. I've also got a bottle of whiskey, along with some leftover sleeping pills that have been sitting in the back of the medicine cabinet. I think I know how to get her cheeks just right. And that's it. That's the end.
Dude, that was awesome.
Holy crap.
That was wonderful.
Well,
Wow, dude.
well, thank you. I do my best.
I don't know why you don't narrate your own stuff on YouTube.
Right?
Like Joseph said, your
Are you a
delivery on
voice
that was
actor?
Sound
fantastic.
system on my computer is shit, and I'm a cheap ass, and I don't want to like buy a microphone and learn how to use the software. I'm just lazy. That's really the answer.
I was gonna say, I was
I'm a
like,
lazy
enough.
fucker.
I bought a $20 mic off of Amazon, and I use a free software to do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the world needs that. Jeez. You are
But yeah,
talented.
I'm a
dude.
lazy asshole. That's the answer. I spend most of my time just reading and like drawing dumb comics. That's just kind of what sucks up my life at the moment, anyway.
That's all right,
Yeah,
though.
but I could like listen to you all day. That was amazing.
Well, thank you. You're all very, very kind to say so.
We're just being truthful, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah, you're in a room full of voice actors, and we're all pretty blown away.
Like, damn, like I wish I had that talent. But I started reading one of your stories last night, and I'm gonna finish it because you're a fantastic writer, dude.
Which one did you choose?
The Burning House.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That one was very popular on I posted it on DeviantArt for a little while, and that one actually won me Deviation of the Day. That one was based on a family that my mother and I knew. My mother, just for backstory, my mother was a Spanish teacher for 32 years, and we actually knew an immigrant family who that we were friends with them, and then they just kind of like disappeared. Like not disappeared like a spook, but just like one day they just packed up and they left, and we don't know what happened to them. And so I think about them all the time, and so that story is kind of based on that a little bit.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Jeez.
It's based on that and my interest in Aztec religion and folklore. My mother's Spanish teacher, so she taught Mesoamerican history, and she passed a little bit of her interest on to me. The three things I inherited from my mother: love of reading, particularly fantasy and sci-fi, my interest in Mesoamerican history, and my love of the man himself, the great lord of surrealism, Salvador Dali. Those are the three things I inherited from her.
Great. I'll agree with you there.
Wow.
Salvador Dali created the greatest documentary ever made by man. And my mother used to have it on VHS, and she used to show it to me all the time. And it was wonderful. What is it called? Salvador Dali, A Living Portrait. It was made in like the 80s. And it's a documentary about Salvador Dali by Salvador Dali. And it is some of the craziest stuff you will ever see. It literally opens with Salvador Dali playing with his It's like a close-up of Salvador Dali's lip as he plays with his trademark mustache for like 5 minutes. And then as the credits end, you see Salvador Dali sitting at a piano that has been gutted. And inside of the piano are a bunch of cats. And he is playing the piano and making the cats yowl. And so he's playing a yowling cat piano. Jeez. And instead of a songbook, it's a page from some random novel that he has. I am not making this up. I couldn't make this up. This is a documentary that actually exists.
I'm going to have to Google that. That's messed up.
But my favorite
I've
part,
never seen that.
They're talking about the Salvador Dali's background, right? Because, every documentary, Salvador Dali was born and blah, 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 blah. And so they get to the part where where he's like got his own property, he's up to modern times. And so the interviewer is like, Salvador Dali, do you want to talk about your childhood? No. Salvador Dali, do you want to talk about your inspiration? No. Salvador Dali, do you want to talk about your artwork? No. Salvador Dali, do you want to do this interview? Yes. It's wonderful. I think you can find it on YouTube. It's old as hell, but it's wonderful.
Oh my gosh.
I like that.
But yes, that story. But yeah, I hope you enjoy that story. It is based a little bit on past experiences, the experiences of other people trying to find their way in this country, in America, and also on my interest in, Aztec religion, Mesoamerican religion, stuff like that.
Zazel Codex would probably talk your ear off about Aztec religion and culture.
Right.
Oh, it's interesting shit. True. It's very interesting stuff. I won't get into it too much though. We're pressed for time. And there's so much. And there's so much. There's just so much.
Right.
But yes, thank you guys so much for having me on, and thank you so much for reading my stuff. And I really appreciate it. I've had an absolute shit time getting anything published in hard copy. I did this thing. So there's like a, what is it? Like a challenge where it's like aim for 100 rejections a year, or whatever the fuck. And I tried it, and I got up to like 80, I think it was. And at the end of it, I didn't feel any accomplishment. I just felt really depressed.
Aww.
Yeah, I believe it.
I've been having a hard time with it, but I've generally found, this is advice for all up and coming writers, by the way. I've generally found that like the narrator community, they are very, 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 very happy and very, very accepting, and they'll generally read anything you want them to. And they'll and the podcasting community. So those folks have been really nice to me. And I've been very grateful to know Jimmy Horrors, Furberries, of course. Lady Vengeance has agreed to do one or two of my things, and then Grim Reaper's Nightmares has done a couple of things of mine. So there's a lot of really cool folks, especially in the horror community, that have just been really nice to kind of.
I turned Lady Vengeance on to you, actually.
What now?
I turned Lady Vengeance on to your writing.
Oh, very cool. Well, thanks a lot, man.
No, I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, thanks a lot. She does fantastic stuff.
She is very good. She's one of my very favorites.
Yes, she does fantastic work. I was trying to think of someone else because there's a couple of people in our community that have been really, really, that are really, really talented. That have been really, really kind.
Oh, there's a lot.
I feel like the horror community is usually very generally very accepting, which is really funny because it's a horror community.
I was about to say it's crazy because I've been a part of the writer community, the sci-fi community. I've watched them get completely torn apart by drama. The horror folks so far have been the kindest and the most stable. Like we just don't give a fuck. It's just like, oh, you like horror? I like
That's
horror.
true.
Let's talk about horror for 10 hours.
Stable, but no.
Yeah, exactly. There's the occasional bit of drama. I can't lie, but for the most part, we tend to avoid it.
Well, yeah, we're human, but I feel like if we're horror, we already know that there's much worse things out there, and it would be silly to be upset about little things.
And yes,
yeah.
Hell yes.
For sure. Thanks, Dex. Glad you're enjoying it.
But yeah, I've been having a great time. Everybody else is claiming how bad Twitter is, and it is. I had a great time with the horror prompt folks the last year or so. They've been awesome.
Yeah, I see you tagged them in a bunch of stuff. I saw you tag them in a post with me yesterday.
Yeah, I like to do that.
Actually, about this very podcast.
I've been trying to give a lot of love to people on the weekends because I'm usually off on the weekends, so I can kind of listen to a lot of stuff and tell people about it. Be like, hey, here's some cool stuff over here, and here's some cool stuff over here, and there's some cool stuff over here. It's like a horror buffet.
Yeah, that's awesome.
A delicious pasta buffet.
Oh no,
for your terror taste buds.
Now I'm hungry. Thanks. Do you have any more advice for any up and coming writers or anything besides that?
Well, I would say, first of all, don't get bogged down in traditional publishing. It's nice. I would say if you've got a novel, traditional should be your first option. But when it comes to poetry and short stories, and when it comes to art, especially if you're interested in art and graphic design and stuff, dude, there's so many better options than magazines and shit. Like, holy crap. There are whole worlds, whole communities of people who would love to engage with your stuff and would love to promote your stuff. You won't get rich, I grant you, but dude, it's, at least for me, it's so rewarding to see people just engage with my work. I mean, have people comment on Substack,
Absolutely.
Have people read my work, have people draw art for my work, which has happened once or twice. That's just so much more rewarding to me than just having it in print. And I can't speak for everybody. So people have different goals. Obviously, if you want to make a living at it, you got mouths to feed, I understand. But for me, just as a hobbyist who really likes this and does it as a passion project, it's just been so much better to pursue stuff on Substack, talking to narrators, having stuff read on YouTube, or having stuff read on podcasts. That's just been more rewarding to me. So my advice to people is just, it's the internet age. Expand. Look around you. Try to reach out to other people. Don't just sit in your room, write something off, stick it in an envelope, and send it to, I don't know, Clark's World or whatever the hell. Look around you. There's stuff all over the place on the internet where you can see your work really appreciated, transformed, promoted. I guess that'd probably be my number one thing.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good advice.
That's very good advice, yeah.
Yeah,
I guess my
getting your
second
stuff
thing
out there
is
important.
Don't get my second piece of advice is don't get bogged down in failure. I mean, everybody does the whole, if you just keep trying, it'll be fine. But it's hard, man. It's hard. I mean, 10 rejections hurt. And like, if you're a nobody and you don't have a lot of connections, you're going to be sending out, guarantee you, 90 pieces, and maybe 5 of them will see the light of day in something. It's just, that's the nature of the game. and it just feels it can really be depressing. I mean, I was at a place when I was in grad school and trying to get stuff published. I was just like deep, dark depression. I mean, in a really bad place. And it can feel overwhelming, you know? It's good to have a community. It's good to have people around you in real life as well as on the internet that can kind of support you and say, look, man, you know, you have talent. Don't give up on yourself. And
No, definitely, yeah.
It's really, people don't give it credit for how hard it is to just keep going. But my advice is don't get bogged down in failure. You know, be on there engaging with people, talking to people, showing people your stuff, and don't isolate yourself. Don't think you're going to do it alone. You're going to churn out a story. You know, we all have the image of the writer, the capital T, capital W, the trope of the guy at the typewriter who done, slaps that paper off, slams the manuscript in an envelope, and takes it to a second guy at a publishing house, you know, and he goes, this is the most genius thing I've ever read. Stamps it. We're going to publish it. That's not reality. It takes a lot of people to get something published. And it doesn't begin with the publisher. It begins with people in your community, in people that you trust to look at your work, to edit it, to advise you. It begins with talking to other writers, talking to them about options. You know, do you think this novel would be worth posting online? Do you think it'd be worth taking to a traditional publisher? Do you know somebody who's a publisher who's trustworthy, who I could take this to, who might, you know, talk to me, give me feedback? It's a networking process. And I mean, I didn't know that. I was like 25, 26 when I started trying to get stuff published. I didn't know. I thought you just put it in an envelope and mailed it off, and some guy in like a Victorian era suit with a cravat sitting at a desk smoking a pipe looked over and went, my God, it's genius. Waved it to another guy who's like sitting at at an old fashioned stamp printing press. This is going in our next issue. You know, it doesn't happen like that.
Right.
It doesn't.
Part of the reason, and this is kind of just the nature of the business, part of it's just supply and demand. And, you know, there's very few big selling publications for horror, science fiction, and fantasy. I think like sci-fi has maybe three, like Clark's World, Asimov's, and fantasy and science fiction. You know, I mean, what are those? The three that you're going to find in Barnes and Noble? It's limited space. That's part of the problem. The other problem is just because writing, like all businesses, is cliquey. And there are people who kind of get into the inside of it and they just kind of sit there and they're not really interested in giving anything the leg up. Every now and then you'll have somebody cool like Harlan Ellison who will discover somebody like Dan Simmons, but rest of the time, not so much. So we have, I guess that's what I mean, we have networks of people on the internet who love this stuff, who appreciate horror and science fiction, not as a business, but as an art. And like I said, you may not make any money, but you can see your work appreciated and transformed. And for me, I don't know, that's always been very rewarding.
That makes sense.
I had somebody...
Right.
Oh, I was going to say that it also depends on how you view those quote-unquote failures. I like to say that they're not really failures. You just figure out a way how to not do something, and then you can change from there. I feel like everything is like a growing opportunity, which, I mean, obviously is easier said than done. You know, when you're in that moment, it doesn't feel great. It sucks to have that put back on you, but if you take it and turn it into like a more positive spin on it, it does help a lot more.
Yeah, I look at my old comic pages like something out of the Cambrian. It's like, oh, what is this? Some kind of giant, shelled, 10-legged insect monster thingy, just kind of crawling around over here in my garbage.
That sounds like something you would draw.
Oh, and I have, and I will.
Yeah. It's funny
That's
to look
funny.
back on old stuff that you've written. I just found some college stuff that I wrote, and I'm like, oh my dear lord. Like, cringe city.
But you grow from that, though. So, like,
Oh,
all
yeah,
of that stuff
definitely.
is what helps build a better you.
Right, exactly.
And then he threw his arms around her tiny waist, and he kissed her passionately, like a man was kissing a woman passionately. And she pulled away and looked into his shiny, wet eyes, and she said, I love you as no one has ever loved a man before. And he smiled, and his teeth sparkled like chrome plating. I've found a bajillion pages buried in big plastic tubs in my parents' basement of stuff that's just like, oh no, we need to kill this with fire. This needs to go in a hole in the ground somewhere.
Oh man, yeah, that's what I was thinking when I was reading my stuff.
Well, you've come a long way since then, that's for sure.
Well, I hope so. I still tinker around. I was in grad school for a while and didn't have much time to write, and then I was in a PhD program, and then I left. That's a long story, but I've kind of come back and been kind of recovering the last year. I got a job working at a hospital, so I kind of set my own hours a little bit. So I've been trying to get back into writing. I have a novel I'd really like to write, and I have a novel that's been sitting in a hard drive that I'd really like to publish. But we will see if either of those things happens. Because I also fiddle around with comics, and I also fiddle around with drawing cool shit for the horror prompt people. So, we'll see.
We just had Hojo on here a while back, he just crowdfunded his first comic, and he crowdfunded the shit out of it.
Damn, son, I need to talk to this dude. I don't know anything about crowdfunding. I'm an old man. I'm like H.P. Lovecraft. I'm just an old man in an old house in the southern Gothic American South, sitting in a dark room with like a little lantern on my desk.
I'd be happy to set up a conversation between the two of us if you want to talk to him about it.
Oh,
I'm sure he wouldn't mind.
Abso-freaking-lutely.
He did it on Indiegogo mostly, and another site called fundmycomic.com.
Oh,
and yeah, he got well over 100% funding. Like, he made a profit. So
that is so cool. I've thought of doing that for. I was thinking of doing a Through the Rye reboot, and then I had this weird thing that I was half-assedly working on called The Wetlands that people seem to really like. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'll be happy to introduce you to.
Yeah. Listening to both.
Yeah, would.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can introduce you to Hojo.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot. That's really cool.
No problem. Like you said, it's a network.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. My allergies are killing me. Nature hates me right now.
No, you're good. I suffer the same way.
It's like that movie, The Happening, where nature's just trying to kill me.
I hope it's not that severe.
I am my friend Nick. I am my friend Deagle, because he likes to do impersonations. We just do like Mark Wahlberg lines from that movie at each other all the freaking time. What? No.
Reaper has a question. Remora, have you ever had a problem where you were plagiarized by somebody?
No.
Oh, thank God.
Oh, lucky you. Even I've had that.
No, and depending on what it was, I probably wouldn't really care all that much.
Well,
but
I wouldn't say that.
it depends. It depends. It depends. It depends.
Don't give people permission to plagiarize you.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. It just depends on what it is. But no, I haven't had that problem.
I did with my Skinwalker in Saskatchewan story. I found 3 people posted it before I got a chance to post it online, because I had it on Reddit to judge people's reaction.
Wow.
And yeah, three
Oh,
different people posted it before I got a chance to post my version of it.
oh, furry one. That is sacrilege. Because that's a
I know,
fantastic story. You read that to us on Horror Prompt, actually.
I did, yeah. Thank you, I appreciate that. Yeah, I had them all taken down. It was fine.
That's cool, man. But no, I haven't had that issue.
Well, you're lucky, because it happens to way too many of us.
Right. That's a
I am
Even Reed
sure.
says it's happened to him once.
Oh, the poor devil.
Yeah.
Poor bloody devil.
I was very pissed off to find versions of my story online before I got to do it myself.
How does that happen, though? Did you just like share it to other people and they're like, oh, yoink, I'm going to shove this up on YouTube now?
I posted the written copy on Reddit on Scary Stories and under the Skinwalker subreddits just to gauge people's reaction to see they see what people thought of it. Did they like it? Did they not like it?
Oh, that's what you meant by gauge people's reactions. Okay, yeah, I'm with you now. Oh, dude, that is so shameless. That is just so fucking shameless.
Not only that, but to not even credit me as the author.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, man.
That is freaking shameless. I got to be honest with you, though. Ever since reading Pet Sematary by Stephen King, I'm more of a Wendigo guy than a Skinwalker guy. But I do like Skinwalkers. I do like some Skinwalkers.
I kind of had plans for a whole Canadian cryptid series where I was going to do like a Wendigo in Winnipeg and a vampire in Vancouver. But I'm sort of stuck on where to take the story from where I've left it, you know? Like how do I
understand that, man, but I hope you'll continue it because I love folklore. I love stuff like that.
Yeah. I do too. I'm just stuck on where I'd take, like how I would advance the story from where I left it, because I left it pretty dark.
Indeed. But hey, man, you know, that's the best part. That's the best place to leave it.
Oh, it was the only fitting ending, really.
But yeah, I like my Wendigos. I like my Walkers of the North. But I have seen some really good Skinwalker stories pop up here and there.
People get mad at me and tell me it was cultural appropriation, and if I was going to write about anything, why didn't I write about fucking Wendigos and that sort of thing that was more native to where I lived? And I was just like, you're telling me that I can't write about something based on my skin color or where I'm from? I'm pretty sure there's a word for that.
Something that, by the way, is not real.
Yeah,
it's not a real
and that was
thing.
That was one of my favorite arguments too. Was that you know, it's a fictional story. You're expected to suspend your disbelief for the sake of enjoyment. So is it really that much of a stretch to ask you to suspend it that much farther to believe there could be a skinwalker in Saskatchewan? Like, is that really so ridiculous? And I finished it up by saying, if I wrote a story about a leprechaun in Africa, would that offend you just as much, or is it possible you're just virtue signaling on behalf of a group of people who don't need your help?
Well, I mean, and like skinwalkers aren't like a major part of American folk. I mean, they're just ghost stories. You know what I mean? It's like
exactly
that you're appropriating vampires from the Romanian.
That's
people.
what I said. I'm not Romanian either. Am I allowed to write about vampires?
Right.
They're not. The people of Romania would probably be offended that you think that vampires are like this super important thing to them. It's like, no, it's just some shit Bram Stoker wrote about. Like, there's more to being Romanian than I want to suck your blood. I mean, come on, man. We've been here for 1,000 freaking years, you know? Like, we have more to our culture than that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I made a mockery out of this guy's arguments, basically.
My father, his major in college was in art and anthropology. He worked as a paint contractor, but he always had an interest in Native American folklore. And he had this giant tome of a book that I read through one time. And I want to read through it again, but I'll have to find the time. It's like a compendium of all the Native American tribes in North America and Canada. And I think you could go through that thing and maybe find 2 mentions of a skinwalker. and they're not going to be called skinwalkers. It's just a creature that's very similar. Like, not a major part of their culture, guys. It's just a goofy ghost story that they tell each other that we for our entertainment have resurrected. You know?
Yeah, exactly. If your argument is that there's no skinwalkers in Saskatchewan, well, I can't fucking argue with you there. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, because there aren't any anywhere.
Because
They don't
there aren't any
exist.
anywhere. Yeah, exactly.
They don't. They're not real. But
And
anyway,
Rupert makes a good point. He said, let's stop calling it cultural appropriation and call it cultural appreciation, because that's what it really is, which is, I think, a really good point. Well said, Reep.
well, I always want to write more horror stories about China. My wife is Chinese, and I have an interest in Chinese history. It's interesting in and of itself, but it also has a lot of really cool folklore. Journey to the West is what most people know about Chinese folklore. That being their great big tome of a foundation myth, along with the inspiration for Dragon Ball Z, which is how a lot of Westerners find out that it exists. But that's neither here nor there. The point is, I've always wanted to write more horror stories based on Chinese culture, and I've always been kind of wary of it, because same thing, I'm scared people are going to get all, well, you're a white guy, you are a guaylo, and you're writing about Chinese stuff. And it's like, yeah, but I mean, I actually sat down and read a bunch of books about Chinese history and Chinese folklore, and I actually appreciate their culture, and I want to bring it to you for your entertainment, so you'll be interested in it. But I don't know, I'm kind of for lack of a better word, I'm kind of a coward.
Well, I think
I just
it's
don't
all
wanna
about
deal
how
with
you
it.
go about it, and if you show that like you're doing the research and you put forth a solid effort into it, I don't think there should be a problem. And if there is, it's just people
Exactly.
looking to be mad about something that they don't need to be.
It's
mad
not
about.
like it's not like you're writing shit like, so sorry, Charlie. Like, you're trying to write real.
Yeah, you're doing the research.
as opposed
You're
to
trying
just
to get into the culture because
bullshit.
you like learning about it, and you want to bring it to other people. I totally support that.
Well,
Yeah,
I really
agree.
I really enjoy reading about their history. So it goes back so freaking far, man. Like, back to the Neolithic. The earliest records we have go back to the Shang Dynasty, which is just like right after the Neolithic era. They had the earliest, I think they had the earliest bronze, or one of the earliest bronze ages in human existence. That was the Zhou Dynasty. And then after that, they had the Qin, and the Qin were the ones who started constructing the wall. Of course, Qin Shi Huangdi is the Dragon Emperor, who's absolutely insane, and he unites the entire country by force. And there's actually a really cool movie about it called Hero, which is about them trying to assassinate the Dragon Emperor. And then, of course, after that is where we start getting China as we know it today, which begins kind of with the Han and really reaches its peak during the Ming and Song. So I really like their history. And I wrote 2 stories using my understanding of Chinese archaeology. One was called The Diorama Box, which was based on my wife's experiences in America. And it was about a young lady coming from China to live and study in America, and how her really aloof upbringing affected her ability to form relationships with other people. And then I wrote one called To Die Just Once, which was based on a kind of a siren situation, a kind of incubus situation. But anyway, I've always wanted to write more about that sort of thing. I've just always been kind of chicken shit, because I'm afraid some knucklehead's going to give me trouble. But I really do enjoy learning about other cultures. China's kind of become a fixation. But I mentioned I like reading about Mesoamerican culture, South Asian culture. I'm really into Thai and Malaysian ghost stories and horror stories. I'm really getting into that. They have this weird tradition of ghosts and vampires whose bodies like pull themselves apart and float around. It's really crazy.
Oh wow.
Oh man.
Cool.
And God in heaven, my friends are gonna slap me because the name of them has just escaped from me. I think one is called an aswang,
Oh, okay.
Yes, they're like bats. They're like vampires. They're from Filipino
Yes, I've heard of
folklore.
those before. Yes.
But yeah, there's a lot of really cool dark myths amongst the people of South Asia. And I really want to get not only into that, but also into their history as well.
Don't let fear stop you, man. Do your thing.
Yeah,
People are gonna negative people are gonna chirp no matter what you do, right? Like
Oh,
somebody's
yeah.
always gonna find a reason
Well, I had
to
a
beat off.
I really wanted to do a horror story based on the Japanese invasion because that negatively affected my wife's family. Her grandfather was alive when the Japanese set up a puppet government in eastern China. And he actually lived out there, and they used to like bully him, and they made them learn like Japanese, and they were like trying to tell them they were Japanese citizens. It was really fucked up. And a lot of people have read the book The Rape of Nanking. I don't know how good it is as history, but it is based on the very real oppression of the Chinese people at the hands of the Japanese. I won't get into it here, but let's just say, for the sake of argument, it's really, really horrible, to the point that the lady who wrote that book began to fall into a very deep depression because she was collecting like photographs that they took of Japanese soldiers doing awful things to people.
Oh.
And to this day, in what's it called? Haran. I am probably mispronouncing that word. It's in northeast China. God darn it! Give me a second. I'm trying to remember how to. It's Haran. There's a place called Unit 731. They've turned it into a museum. But when I was going to go to China with my wife, that trip fell through. But we were going to go to visit her grandfather's grave and burn ghost money. I wanted her to take me there. She was very confused by this, but I really wanted to see Unit 731 because I wanted to kind of see the museum for myself. But they have preserved one of the places that the Japanese used for, to put it politely, they tested germ warfare on humans.
Oh.
And the people who ran that museum were protected from prosecution by the American and Japanese governments, respectively. And they used to test the germs on living people and then drop fleas infected with bubonic plague onto Chinese people.
Ugh.
So really dark stuff. And I really wanted to write about it, have a horror story based around it. A mix of real and supernatural horrors. But I've always been too cowardly because it's just kind of, it's very sensitive. And I don't know if I'm culturally if I'm culturally appropriate to do that. So I don't know. I'll think about it.
I say do it. I say do it.
I just give it a shot.
I say if you research it and stuff and you put enough effort into it, it doesn't hurt to write it down, get it down on paper, and then
Right.
yeah, and then you can go from there and decide forward. Maybe have some people look at it that are more in that culture that understand that better, and they can give you feedback on it too.
Mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, I really like that sort of thing. Horrifying and horrible as it is. And I'm also, as you can probably guess, I'm also a true crime fanatic. So
Oh,
that
my man, me
that
too.
helps me out.
I love true crime.
I'm very. I mean, since getting married, because my wife is like a ray of sunshine on a gloomy day, I kind of have to like put that stuff away a little bit, But when I'm just kind of
Yeah.
alone and I'm like taking notes from a book or just drawing, and I'm not really like, I'm kind of multitasking, I'll put on something. I'll put on some dreading or something like that. But the thing is, there's a movie called It's got Simon Pegg in it. It's called A Fantastic Fear of Everything, about a guy who starts writing about serial killers. And writing about serial killers makes him super, super paranoid about everything in the world around him. And it's not a great movie, but I feel that so hard sometimes because it's like you're just kind of listening to these stories about people who get killed by the neighbors, and it's like, oh my God.
Oh my God.
My neighbor brought me a cake yesterday.
I can tell you what, I will never get into a van with a stranger ever, and that's because of my love of true crime.
Start Googling the effects of cyanide poisoning.
Good common sense.
Yeah, it's common sense,
That's
but also because a lot of people
Mary.
think, like, oh, that could never happen to me, and then when you hear that it does happen to people, you're like, oh, okay, I'm not even going to try that. I'm not going to attempt that. It's not going to happen.
Well, hospitals, man, like the number of real life like Annie Wilkes types, people that were nurses that like did inpatients. It's like, oh man.
Yeah.
Hi ladies, how are you? I'm back to work today. Please don't kill me with insulin, thanks.
Oh my God. The amount of research and stuff that I've done, there is no such thing as me being like, yeah, no, that's totally fine. I don't need to know what you're putting into my body, except I need you to answer all of these questions before you come anywhere near me.
Excuse me, nurse. I'd just like you to fill out this questionnaire before you put that in my IV.
I need this form filled out, please.
Oh God.
Dexter had a question. He wants to know if you listened to The Disturbing Truth.
No, I have not heard of that one.
Oh, you need to.
I shall.
So
I shall give it a listen.
The production value too of his videos is just amazing.
Yes, I do enjoy a bit of true crime, despite the fact that it makes me extremely paranoid.
Right.
But
no,
what's really weird is that, like,
prepared for everything. That's how I feel.
That's
about
healthy.
It. You're just overly prepared.
You know, like if you're watching true crime and you feel nothing, like that's when you know something's wrong. To be paranoid is healthy, I think.
Well, I really love Edward Gorey. He is like the king of cross hatching, and he inspires a lot of my work. I love Edward Gorey. And he does some fantastic interviews. And one time he was talking about how the one case, because he's a true crime guy too. You can kind of tell by his, bizarre books and stuff. But he said the one case that really disturbed him was the Moors murders. He didn't really talk about it very much. That was the one that really bothered him. And he wrote a book called the Deranged Couple, the Murderous Couple, the Deranged Couple. And I was like, the Moors murders, the Myra Hindley murders, what are those? And I looked it up, and that was one of those cases where like somebody recommended me a true crime, and it's like, oh no, I wish I had known about those. That's really disturbing.
Yeah. Oh,
and from Edward Gorey of all people.
Right. When you start diving into true crime, you realize, oh my God. Humans are awful.
Humans are terrible creatures.
Awful.
Can I actually share a fact with you guys that I learned the other day? That it has nothing to do with true crime whatsoever. It's just a fact I can't get out of my head, and I need you guys to suffer with me.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so did you know that they found when they did autopsies on people that do dog grooming, they found that there is hair behind their eyeballs, like stuck in there, from all the dog grooming and stuff, and it just never goes away. And I needed to share that because that is what's been running through my mind ever since I heard it, and I just can't get past it. So I needed to share that on with everybody else.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm a physiologist. I didn't know that. That's
Wow, I'd like to see like the comparison for people who own pets for like a long time.
Well, that's why I'm upset by it, because I have 2 cats and 2 dogs.
Now I'm worried that I have hair behind my eyeballs.
I can't stop rubbing my eyes, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
you get drunk and you start talking to the cat.
Oh no.
You get drunk and start talking to the cat. You're behind my eyes right now. Did you know that?
You're with me forever and ever. You can never leave me.
Oh, God.
And
podcast
Sam
and you're like,
shed
you took my
so
paws.
much,
This is my
too.
revenge.
I'm so glad I could give you guys that piece of information, everybody in the chat as well, because I need you guys to suffer with me on this.
Paper says, great, I'll never shave stray cats again.
I don't know what he's talking about. He eats cats. My God, Reaper. Or so he says.
My wife, when I brought her to my parents the first time. So I'm from Southern Virginia and my wife is from Beijing. And she was born in Texas and she went to an international school. So she speaks English like perfectly, but she grew up a good portion of her life in Beijing. And I bring her home and we're having a barbecue. And my dad jokingly says to my girlfriend at the time, wife soon to be, he's like, yeah, Jane, I hope you don't mind. We don't have any of these that are dog. And my wife, without missing a beat, goes, Mr. Vanny, that's the Koreans that do that.
Oh my good God. Oh.
Funny.
Oh, goodness. The best story is when I brought her to my grandparents. Because my grandparents, they live in this tiny little town in Southern Virginia. I mean, like one of those old factory towns that got shut down. And they're like, at this date, my grandmother's 90 now. I think she was like in her late 80s at the time. And I bring my girlfriend, wife to be to her. And of course, my wife is Asian. And my grandmother goes, Jane, honey, where are you from? And my wife just looks at her with this big smile and goes, Texas.
Oh, jeez.
That's great.
Uh,
Well, we usually wrap it up after about an hour, which it's been now.
well, it's great
So,
to be here. Thank you all for
Yeah, it's
having me. I really
you've been
appreciate it.
You've been a great guest, very engaging and fun to talk
Yeah,
to.
you really have.
Thank you for being here.
I'll do my best. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
So we were glad to have you on. Thanks everybody for listening, and we will see you next time on Pause and Listen, a horror review podcast.